Good evening. I am your host, Mr. Addams. Let's begin. Tonight's video is the tale of the Gurning Man of Glasgow, my home city. I'll be honest and say it was only recently that I came across this ghost story, but the minute I read it, I knew it would be something interesting to discuss on the channel. Now, these events happened in the Cross Hill area of Glasgow from 1976 to 1979. It's been reported that he was only ever seen between the hours of 9 PM and 4 AM, and that out of all the sightings, he was never seen by a male, only females. So let's discuss some of these sightings. The first was by two teenage girls. They were walking home from a party and it was late at night. The streets were lit up by a particularly bright moon. As they approached their destination, they noticed a strange man, who they described as being aged in his late 50s, bald, extremely thin, and dressed in a black, tight leotard. He was stood beneath a streetlight and appeared to be nervously moving on the spot with agitated actions. As the two girls approached the man, their sense of fear grew and they stopped talking, so as to concentrate on moving past the odd figure as quickly as possible. As they passed, they could see from their peripheral vision that the man was pulling a bizarre, contorted expression, halfway between a smile and a pained grimace. He was also snorting and grunting loudly. Picking up their step, the two friends were soon running in fear. One decided to glance back to see if the man was following them, but was astonished to see that he had vanished from sight entirely. Now, according to the reports made by the two teenage witnesses, there was no possible way the strange figure that they saw could have moved out of sight so quickly. In a matter of seconds, the bizarre-looking man had vanished from where he had been standing, despite the fact that the road offered no cover or hiding place. This inexplicable disappearance became a common theme for most of the sightings. Less than 100 metres from this sighting, we have another unpleasant account, which came from a middle-aged woman. She lived in a semi-detached house with her husband and two daughters, and according to her report, she woke one night to the sound of snorting in her bedroom. Initially, she thought it was her husband snoring unusually, but soon she became aware that the noise was actually coming from the end of her bed. Terrified, she carefully lifted her head from her pillow in order to scan the room. She claims to have seen a man at the end of her bed, lit up in the moonlight. He appeared to be vigorously rubbing his hands against his chest, and he was grinning menacingly. Letting out a blood-curdling scream, the horrified woman woke her husband with a start. Instinctively, he leapt out of bed, slammed his fist against the light switch on the wall, thus illuminating the room. Unsettled and puzzled, he asked his wife what was wrong. When she lifted her head again, she could see the strange figure had gone. Normally, we would attribute this type of incident as a night terror, sleep paralysis, a waking dream. However, the similarities between this and the previous sighting are just far too similar to dismiss so easily. Another reported sighting states that an elderly woman who was in the process of putting her milk bottles out for collection reported seeing a strange-looking man in tight black clothing stood in the middle of a road. She stated that he was moving from side to side as though jogging on the spot. In the blink of an eye, the man vanished from sight, leaving the witness puzzled and scared. In total, there have been 17 reports of the Gurning Man made in the Cross Hill area of Glasgow between 1976 and 1979. 11 of the sightings were made on the street, while the 6 other sightings were reported to have occurred inside someone's home. 2 of the witnesses were convinced that the apparition was an intruder in the process of burgling their homes. In both instances, when the police arrived, they discovered there had been no burglar and no sign of a break-in. So as we move to present day, more sightings have been reported, this time in the Queen's Park area, which is next to Cross Hill. The first woman describes seeing a spindly old man, dressed in tight black clothes, with a neckline that sat low across his chest. He was stood in the road between a parked car and a van, so his presence only became known to the witness, who was walking on the pavement, when she was within feet of him. She described him as old, maybe aged between 70 and 90 years. As soon as she laid eyes upon him, his face shifted into a terrifying expression and he started flapping his arms wildly in front of him, while snorting and groaning loudly. The second modern day sighting involves a group of teenage girls who were sitting in a park, when a member of the group noticed something unusual from behind them in the trees. She alerted her friends, who quickly cut to silence and focused their attention on the spot in question. Unable to discern what was causing the disturbance, one of the party decided to shine their mobile phone's torch towards the area. To their collective horror, the light fell upon the contorted and twisted face of the Gurning Man. He stood, jittering and muttering, rubbing his hands against his chest in a maniacal fashion. The girls scattered sharply. So let's summarise what was reported. It was a man seen between 1976 and 1979 in the Cross Hill area, and then as recent as 2018 in the Queen's Park area, right next to Cross Hill. The problem I have with this is there's a 40-year gap between the two. In the first lot of sightings, he was described as being in his late 50s, and the second between 70s and 90s. Now at a push, that the maths kind of adds up. If he was maybe 50 years old at the first sightings and then 90 years old in the second sightings. The problem I have with that, for it to be a normal, explainable, real events, and all the sightings and everything that's been reported is true, and there is nothing paranormal or anything going on top of that, this man would have to have some sort of mental disability. Maybe even a burglar, and that would explain some of his actions, why he had dark clothes and how he could disappear so quickly. However, if someone like that was going around and getting spotted by people, someone would have got a hold of him. Something you would imagine would have happened to him. And the fact that someone in that mental state could live to 90 years old without proper medical care, that just doesn't add up for me. Now, some of the other explanations that have been given for this is that he's some sort of alien or someone from another dimension. There is nothing to back that up. That to me doesn't make any sense. Now, the other main explanation has been that it's a ghost, some form of spirit that's returned now to a growing interest in his existence, almost as if the power is gained from the simple act of being aware of him. It's possible. However, for me, I would say this is more likely what's happened. Let's say that the first sightings are true to some extent. We're talking about 1970s Glasgow. We don't have the internet. We don't have phones the way we do now, or TV the same way. So we have 17 sightings all in this same area around a 3-year period. So that leads me to believe that it's possible there was some sort of weird bald man dressed in black that was seen at some point, maybe even that had a Gurning face. But I do believe that each sighting grew arms and legs. Everything's passed on through word of mouth. And as each person tells it to someone else, they add their own bits, they take things out that might give more plausible explanations for what's happened. So people become aware of the story from their friends and family, and then anything strange that happens to them would be contorted and altered to fit the story of the Gurning Man. Entertainment for stories to tell each other and scare each other. An example would be that event 1 happens. A woman sees a strange Gurning Man who scares the hell out of her, so she tells everyone she knows. Then event 2, someone sees someone who's male, possibly wearing dark clothes, and that's really it. They start to think in the back of their head about this Gurning Man. They tell their friends they possibly have seen this Gurning Man. It's an interesting story, it makes people interested in what's happened to you. When they then tell the story to someone else, it's 100% it was the Gurning Man, and they add a lot more to it, that he came up to her, he made this face. And then the biggest thing gets added. He disappears without a trace. And that is what takes the story from being a strange tale about this bald, leotard-wearing 50-year-old man with a strange face to scary. Because something that can disappear completely and at random can also reappear at any place and at any time at random. Maybe I'm wrong. Everything I've looked at is open to interpretation, because the only true thing that we know is that the Gurning Man sightings have never been solved. I've been your host, Mr. Addams. Good night.